Hello, this is Karame on my Monk Swaggle, and this is going to be my 5.4 Mistweaver Monk guide. I know that it's a bit late as we are in WAD Beta now, but in case anyone wants to brush up on their Mistweaver or just started a Mistweaver, here's some helpful information for you. So for Mistweavers, the first thing you should know is our stat priority is Haste to Breakpoint, then Crit, then Spirit, then Mastery. Haste will be reforged in Tiger Stance, and our Haste break points are 91.58 and 31.45. The reason we reforge in Stance of the Fierce Tiger is that we have a haste buff from being in Stance of the Wise Serpent, which increases haste from items by 50%. So, when I am in Tiger Stance, I have 91.78 haste, which is very close to the breakpoint. And here you see my haste is up to 13,767, which is quite a bit more. But the breakpoints are in Tiger Stance. That's what you need to know. At lower gear levels, the 31.45 breakpoint is what you're going to be looking for. These give you extra Renewing Mist haste breakpoints. Renewing Mist is by far our most important spell. It needs to be kept on cooldown, and you should be casting it on a different person each time. You should track your Renewing Mist numbers with some kind of add-on or weak aura, like I have here, and it will tell you how many Renewing Mists you have out at one time and their duration, and that's when you know when it's optimal to Thunder Focus Tea. It's also optimal to Thunder Focus Tea while under the effects of any short-term throughput increases, such as Trinkets. Thunder Focus Tea costs 1 chi and refreshes the duration of all active Renewing Mists when you cast Uplift with Thunder Focus Tea. This means that you'll have far more Renewing Mists out as you continue casting Renewing Mist, and you will be uplifting many more targets. Thunder Focus Tea can be used either on cooldown or a little bit in advance of big damage bursts for certain raid encounters where it is necessary to do the most healing at those points in time. Crit is our second best stat because we don't really benefit from Mastery, and haste above the breakpoint does not really benefit us at all. Crit causes our spells to heal for more, and it also causes us to gain additional Mana Tea charges, because Mana Tea can crit. And Mistweavers, other than using Renewing Mist and Uplift, which should be your main or only chi dump, also have the chi generators Chi Brew, Expel Harm, Rushing Jade Wind, and Soothing Mists, as well as Surging Mists. Oh, and Crackling Jade Lightning. So you can generate chi in many ways, but some of the main ways are to spam Soothing Mists, like this, and just, don't wait for it to channel. Or you can just sit there channeling if you want, but it's not really efficient. Enveloping Mists can be used alongside Soothing Mist, but it will mostly be overheal. You can also use Surging with Soothing Mist, but it will only cast on the target that you are channeling Soothing on. So does Enveloping. But it will be instant then, instead of having a cast time. Another way to generate chi is by using Surging Mist. With the Glyph of Surging Mist, Your Surging Mist, when you're not channeling Soothing, will smart heal the most injured target within 40 yards. So you can just cast Surging as filler for chi. This is very effective, but it also is one of the most expensive ways of maintaining your chi generation, especially if you're also using Rushing Jade Wind. Another way is that you can use Crackling Jade Lightning, which will proc Eminence Healing, and so it does damage as well as generates chi, and is a decent middle ground between generating chi, doing damage, and a little bit of healing. So that's one way you can do that too. These are just the filler ways to generate chi. Obviously, you always want to use Renewing Mist, Expel Harm, and Chi Brew pretty much on cooldown. You have to use Chi Brew basically as needed, and you should be drinking your mana tea for mana as needed in any downtime you have if you are not at 100%. Because going and then drinking all your tea probably wastes a lot of mana tea charges and also wastes a lot of time. So you should just be doing that as you can. The glyphs I use are Glyph of Surging Mist, Glyph of Renewing Mist, and Glyph of Enduring Healing Sphere. It's worth noting Enduring Healing Sphere is being removed with WoD. Surging Mist is going to be Crane's Dance only in WoD currently. Spinning Crane Kick is worthwhile, but if you're spec'd into Rushing Jade Wind always moves at full speed, as you see. So you do not need a Spinning Crane Kick. For your spec, you should be using any of the first rows. Good. I like Tiger's Lust because it's a movement speed that I can control the direction of, and I don't have to roll, so I still have roll, but I also have Tiger's Lust, which also breaks movement and pairing effects, which does have a lot of utility in PvE. For your next talent row, right now I'm spec Chi Wave, but most of the time in a raid I use Chi Burst. For 25, Chi Burst is really the best one for almost all fights, if not all fights. You use it like you would Divine Star on a priest. You stand behind as many people as possible and try to hit basically all of them with Chi Burst. And for some reason Chi Wave's not working, but Chi Wave bounces between a friendly target and an enemy, and it'll bounce to a different friendly target or enemy depending on what its AI decides to do. This is a good talent for 10-mans. It's also a good talent for like 5-mans and stuff, which is probably why I have it right now. It's worth noting that its travel time can be kind of slow, and it's not good for like burst periods of damage. It's good for, you know, prolonged periods of, you know, light damage, and that's about it. Next talent row, Chi Brew. Like, don't even consider these other two things. Ascension is the worst option of the bunch. It doesn't really give you any extra regen. Maximum mana increase does affect your mana tea, but with Chi Brew, you're actually gaining mana tea charges every time you use it. You gain at least 2, and then you can gain more if it crits. Power Strikes used to be pretty good, but, or used to be at least, you know, viable. Now it's not. Next talent row depends on what you're doing. I mostly switch between Ring of Peace and Leg Sweep. And this row, it's either Diffuse or Dampen Harm. Don't use Healing Elixirs. It's bad. Use something that will give you damage reduction, and you choose it based on what you're doing. Remember that Dampen Harm works on magic as well. And when you use it, it's up for 45 seconds, which is half of its duration. So you have 3 charges of the damage reduction, and it reduces the attack by 50% if it will do over 20% of your health, and that's pretty nice for a lot of things. Whereas Diffuse is a 90% reduction, which clears magic debuffs, and it reduces the magic damage by 90%, which is really good for some things, but most of the time I run with Dampen Harm. Rushing Jade Wind is the best talent for this tier. There are fights where you can use other things. If the raid is not stacked for most of the fight, like say on Nazgrim, then you want to use the Tiger. On some fights, I use Chi Torpedo, and when I spec Chi Torpedo, I also spec Celerity. And the only fight I use Chi Torpedo on this expansion is Galacris. And you could use Rushing Jade Wind on that, especially if you're fist weaving. You want to use Rushing Jade Wind. So, yeah, for fist weaving, you jab, which procs muscle memory, Tiger Palm to keep up the buff, then you use Blackout Kick for 2 chi. Blackout Kick also maintains a buff. And when you use Spinning Crane Kick or Rushing Jade Wind and you hit 3 or more targets, you also proc muscle memory. And for AoEing, you want to use more Blackout Kick than Tiger Palm, and for single target, you want to use more Tiger Palm than Blackout Kick. The other you just use to maintain the buff. Crackling Jade Lightning is not part of fist weaving at this time, and it still procs Eminence, it just doesn't do anything else. Besides, you know, damage and stuff, it doesn't give you any buffs or anything like that. So, that's pretty much it, I think. You do want Spirit, you're not as Spirit reliant as other classes, but basically you can use your regen to generate chi using glyphed surgings, and you can actually, you know, yourself if you're healing like really hard like that. But you know, that shouldn't be a problem, and that shouldn't be your main concern if you're just starting off with the class. Soothing is a very cheap and fairly, you know, easy chi generator, but it's not going to do a lot of healing, really, and you shouldn't be spending most of your time soothing. You should be, like, you know, fist weaving or Rushing Jade Wind. You know, make sure, though, your priorities are always Renewing Mist and Uplift. Always. And as long as you're using your cooldown spells, like, on cooldown, you know, Renewing Mist, Expel Harm, your Chi thing, Rushing Jade Wind, Chi Brew, all that. Oh, and Thunder Focus Tea, which I just used on a Surging, because why the hell not? You're pretty good. Oh, and of course, how could I forget? Revival. It's your raid cooldown. It's a 3-minute cooldown. It's one shot to heal the raid. It can be used really well or really badly. I see monks who just basically use it whenever, and these are usually bad monks, and it ends up doing, like, their #1 heal because they don't know how to press any other buttons, really, and they just hit revival, like, at the first sign of, like, oh my god, the raid's all, like, somewhat damaged. So, no. If you know when big raid damage is gonna happen, use it then. But don't have, like, an itchy trigger finger, because it can be strong. It's definitely not as good as something like Healing Tide Totem, but, you know, just use it wisely. So, yeah. The other thing to know is that fist weaving isn't mandatory. It's good to know how to do it, but it is a healing throughput loss. So, you have to keep that in mind. You can do decent damage with it, but it's not going to increase your healing. But it's good to do in downtime, like to throw out some extra damage. You can also use Crackling Jade Lightning if you're standing at ranged and do some damage that way. But yeah, you see, I am using the Chiji cloak. This is your best cloak. If you have this, or are planning to have it, then you should be using the Chiji cloak. The Yulon cloak can proc for us, but it does not proc off of Rushing Jade Wind or Fist Weaving. It does proc off of Crackling Jade Lightning, Chi Torpedo, and Chi Wave, Zen Sphere, and Chi Burst. I believe those are the only ones. It also, it doesn't proc off our Tiger. So, procs off this, Chi Torpedo, and these three, and Crackling. So, it is usually not worth using the cloak unless you're really overhealing an encounter and you need like all the extra damage you can get. In which case you could try gaming it with Zen Sphere, because Zen Sphere is like one of the better things for getting it to proc, but Zen Sphere is such a bad talent outside of that it's really like you should just drop a healer for a DPS at that point. But yeah, that's something worth considering. I've had people argue with me and say that Rushing Jade Wind procs the cape, and I have tested it repeatedly. It does not. So, yeah. Also, if you're curious and you're, in Siege of Orgrimmar, the trinkets we like are pretty much all of them except for the regen trinket from Black Fuse. You don't want that. But the Thok trinket, which cleaves, and the Prismatic Prison of Pride are really good. You can also get the multi-strike trinket for fights where the raids really spread out, like, say, Immersius, or possibly Paragons, something like that. And you can also run double amp with the Purified Bindings of Immersius, which will proc from meleeing, and I don't believe they will proc from anything else. But if you're fist weaving, then you'll be meleeing, so it actually can proc for us. Oh, and speaking of meleeing, one thing, if you're really new to monks or mistweavers, in case you didn't know, mistweavers are considered melee by all raid mechanics. So if it's a raid mechanic that only targets ranged based on class or spec, it will not target us. This is really observable in the first tier of this expansion. Unlike Windlord, who would drop the wind bombs on people, he does not drop wind bombs on us. Spirit Kings, the pinning arrows would never target us. Fang, the arcane explosion thing, would not target us. I forget the exact name of it. But now there are mechanics which target people based on their distance from the boss, such as Desecrate on Garrosh. So you need to know, like, what kind of mechanic you're dealing with. Like, on Black Fuse, saw blades and lasers only target ranged. So, as a Mistweaver, you can stand at ranged and Rushing Jade Wind to heal them and never get targeted by those things, but you will still get targeted by bombs. So, yeah, that's something to keep in mind, and just, familiarize yourself with the raid mechanics, and then you can take advantage of it. And, there's a lot of fights where you can just safely stand in melee. Some just are annoying to stand in melee, so I don't. But otherwise, there's, a lot of benefits to standing in melee. And lastly, just in case you forgot, our statue helps us with Eminence and also Soothing Mist. Our statue right now kind of sucks, but its Soothing Mist becomes a lot better in WoD. And I made a video about my WoD Mistweaver impressions, so check that out if you're interested in that, because I don't want to spend a lot of time here on that. Also, non-talented, you have Fortifying Brew, which is a cooldown, increases your health by 20% and reduces damage taken by 20%. We also have Zen Meditation, which will reduce our damage taken by 90%, but it's a channel, so you can't move while using it unless you glyph it. And it also does some, like, raid magic thing, but it's not a raid cooldown. It doesn't work like that. It sounds cooler than it is. It's mostly just a personal cooldown. Transcendence you can use to hop around, but it doesn't really see a ton of use. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I hope you guys have good luck with your Mistweavers, and I hope this guide has helped you a bit. If you are interested in researching Mistweavers yourself, I recommend the official healing forums, and also the MMO champion forums have a decent thread on it. But always remember, take things you read with a grain of salt, because there's a lot of misinformation out there, and a lot of people who play Mistweavers differently or wrong, because it's a very different healing class. Like, we rely so much on smart heals, and a lot of them aren't really that smart, and we're not in a great place right now, and, the community is just a little frustrated, and it's okay. We'll get through it. I hope you've enjoyed this video though, and I hope you have a great day. Be sure to check out my other videos. Thank you!